Maya stood backstage, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the sheet music. She tried to smooth down the wrinkles on the pages, but they just wouldn't stay flat. Her palms were sweating, and she felt like her heart might actually jump out of her chest. This was it. Her first real audition. For years, she had been singing at her local church. Every Sunday, she would stand with the choir and sing hymns. People always told her she had a beautiful voice. Her mom said she sang like an angel. Her friends at church encouraged her to try something bigger. "You should audition for the community theater," they said. "You're too talented to just sing on Sundays." So here she was at 28 years old, finally taking that leap. The theater wasn't anything fancy. It was just a small community playhouse on the edge of town. But to Maya, it felt like Broadway. They were putting on a production of a famous musical, and she had decided to audition for one of the supporting roles. She had practiced for weeks. Every morning in the shower, every evening while cooking dinner, every moment she was alone in her car. She knew the song by heart. She could sing it perfectly when she was by herself. But now, standing in the wings of the actual stage, everything felt different. Through the gap in the curtain, she could see the director sitting in the 5th row. His name was Richard, and everyone in the local theater scene knew him. He had worked on some big productions years ago in the city, and he had a reputation. Some people said he was brilliant. Others said he was brutal. Maya had heard stories about how he would tear into performers who didn't meet his standards. Next to him sat a few other people with clipboards and notebooks. The musical director, the assistant director, maybe a producer. Maya couldn't really tell. Her vision was getting blurry from the nerves. "Maya Chen, you're up," someone called from behind her. She took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The lights were so bright she could barely see the people in the audience. That should have helped, she thought. If she couldn't see them, maybe she wouldn't be so nervous, but it didn't help. She introduced herself, her voice coming out smaller than she intended. "Hi, I'm Maya. I'll be singing I Dreamed a Dream today." From the darkness of the theater, she heard Richard's voice. "Speak up. We can't hear you back here." Maya cleared her throat and tried again, louder this time. "I'm Maya Chen and I'm singing I Dreamed a Dream." "Better. Go ahead when you're ready." She nodded to the piano player who sat off to the side of the stage. He began playing the opening notes. Maya knew this was her moment. She had been preparing for this for so long. The first verse started soft and gentle, which was perfect because Maya's voice was naturally sweet in that range. But as soon as she reached for the first high note, something went terribly wrong. Her voice cracked. It wasn't a small crack that she could recover from. It was a terrible, obvious break that echoed through the theater. She heard someone in the audience suppress a giggle. Maya felt her face go hot. She tried to continue pushing through to the next line, but her confidence was already shattered. Her breathing was all wrong now. She was taking shallow breaths instead of the deep ones she had practiced. Her pitch started to waver. She could feel it falling apart, but she didn't know how to fix it. The more she tried to control her voice, the worse it got. She was gripping the sheet music so tightly that it was starting to crumple in her hands. Then she heard the word that would haunt her for weeks. "Stop." Richard stood up from his seat, his silhouette visible against the dim house lights. "Just stop. Please stop." Maya's voice died in her throat. The piano player's hands froze over the keys. The entire theater went silent. "What are you doing up there?" Richard's voice wasn't just critical. It was harsh, cutting through the air like a knife. "You're embarrassing yourself. This isn't a church social where everyone claps no matter what happens. This is theater. This is supposed to be professional." Maya felt like she couldn't breathe. Her eyes started to burn with tears, but she fought them back. She would not cry in front of these people. She would not give them that satisfaction. "I can hear that you have no training," Richard continued, still standing, addressing her like a teacher scolding a child. "You're singing from your throat, not your diaphragm. Your breathing is completely wrong. And frankly, if you can't handle the pressure of a simple community theater audition, you have no business being on stage at all." Someone next to him whispered something, probably trying to get him to ease up, but Richard wasn't finished. "I appreciate that you took the time to come here today, but this really isn't the right fit. You need to go back and get some actual training before you waste people's time with auditions." Maya stood there frozen for a moment that felt like an eternity. The sheet music slipped from her hands and scattered across the stage floor. She could hear the papers sliding, but she couldn't move to pick them up. Then suddenly her body kicked into action. She turned and walked off the stage as quickly as she could without actually running. She heard Richard say something else behind her, but the blood rushing in her ears drowned out his words. She made it to the backstage area, grabbed her purse from where she'd left it on a folding chair, and headed straight for the exit. A few other performers waiting for their turn looked at her with a mixture of pity and relief that it hadn't been them up there. Maya pushed through the heavy theater doors and stepped out into the parking lot. The late afternoon sun felt too bright after the darkness of the theater. She walked quickly to her car, got in, and locked the doors. Only then did she let herself cry. She cried for how excited she had been that morning. She cried for all the hours she had spent practicing. She cried for the humiliation of standing on that stage while someone told her she was wasting everyone's time. She cried because her friends had been wrong. She wasn't talented. She wasn't special. She was just someone who could sing okay in a church choir, and she had been foolish to think she could be anything more. Maya sat in her car for 20 minutes before she felt calm enough to drive home. When she finally started the engine, she made herself a promise. She would never audition for anything again. She would stick to Sunday mornings at church, where people were kind and supportive and would never tell her she was embarrassing herself. She had taken her shot, and she had failed spectacularly. What Maya didn't know as she drove away from that theater was that someone in the audience had heard something different in her voice that day. Someone who had been sitting quietly in the back row taking notes, someone who had once been exactly where Maya was now, and that someone was about to change everything. When Maya got home, she went straight to her bedroom and closed the door. She could hear her roommate in the kitchen, probably making dinner, but she couldn't face anyone right now. She needed to be alone with her shame. She threw her purse on the bed and caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying. Her mascara had run in dark streaks down her cheeks. She looked as broken as she felt. Maya went to the bathroom and washed her face, scrubbing away the makeup and the tears. She changed into sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, the kind of clothes that felt like armor against the world. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her mom asking how the audition went. Maya stared at the message for a long time before typing back a simple lie. It was fine. I'll know in a few days. She couldn't bear to tell her mom the truth, not yet, maybe not ever. That evening, Maya lay in bed replaying every terrible moment in her head, the crack in her voice, the laughter, Richard's harsh words echoing through the theater. You're embarrassing yourself. Over and over she heard those words. She had been so naive to think she could just walk into an audition and succeed. She had no formal training. She had never taken a real voice lesson in her life. Everything she knew about singing came from watching videos online and imitating what she heard on recordings. Richard was right. She had wasted everyone's time. As the night wore on, Maya made decisions about her future. She would stop dreaming about performing. She would stop listening to cast recordings and imagining herself in those roles. She would accept that some things just weren't meant for people like her. She would be practical. She would focus on her job at the insurance company. Maybe finally pursue that promotion her boss kept mentioning. She would find happiness in the small things, in her safe little life where no one could humiliate her in front of a room full of strangers. Maya eventually fell asleep with those thoughts, convinced that her brief adventure into the world of theater was over before it had really begun. But sometimes the story we tell ourselves about our failures isn't the whole story. Sometimes there are people watching who see things we can't see in ourselves. Sometimes the worst moment of our lives is just the beginning of something we never could have imagined. 2 weeks passed, and Maya had almost convinced herself to forget about the audition. She threw herself into her work at the insurance company, staying late at the office to avoid going home where she would have nothing to do but think about her failure. She stopped singing in the shower. She avoided the music streaming apps on her phone. Even at church on Sunday, she mouthed the words to the hymns instead of actually singing them. The joy had been sucked out of something she had loved her entire life. Her friends noticed the change. "You're so quiet lately," her coworker Jennifer said during lunch one day. "Is everything okay?" Maya forced a smile. "Just tired. Work has been busy." It was easier to lie than to explain what had happened. Easier than admitting she had been foolish enough to think she could be a performer. On a Thursday afternoon, Maya was filing paperwork when her phone buzzed with an email notification. She almost ignored it, but something made her look. The subject line read, "Following up from your audition." Her stomach dropped. She didn't want to read it. It was probably just a formal rejection letter, thanking her for her time and wishing her well. She had heard that some theaters sent those out just to be polite, but curiosity won. She opened the email. It wasn't from Richard, the director who had humiliated her. It was from someone named Diana Rodriguez. The name sounded familiar, but Maya couldn't quite place it. She read the message. Dear Maya, I was the musical director at your recent audition. I know the experience didn't go as you hoped, but I heard something in your voice that I think has real potential. I'd love to meet with you to discuss this further if you're willing. Would you be available for coffee sometime this week? Best regards, Diana. Maya read the email 3 times, trying to figure out if it was some kind of joke. The musical director wanted to meet with her? After that disaster of an audition? She remembered Diana now. She had been sitting in the back of the theater, so far back that Maya had barely noticed her. While Richard had been front and center, loud and demanding, Diana had been a quiet presence in the shadows. Maya's first instinct was to delete the email and pretend she never saw it. What could Diana possibly want to discuss? More ways that Maya had embarrassed herself? Some kind of pity mentoring that would only remind her of her failure? But there was something about the message that felt genuine. Diana had called it potential. She had said she heard something in Maya's voice. Before she could talk herself out of it, Maya typed a response. Hi Diana, thank you for reaching out. I could meet Saturday morning if that works for you. She hit send before her doubts could stop her. Saturday morning arrived cold and gray. Maya almost canceled 3 times, but something kept her from backing out. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was a tiny spark of hope that refused to die completely. They agreed to meet at a small coffee shop downtown. Maya arrived 10 minutes early and ordered a latte she didn't really want, just to have something to do with her hands. She chose a table in the corner and waited, watching the door. Diana walked in right on time. She was in her early 40s with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, and kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, nothing like the formal clothes she'd had on at the audition. Maya, thank you so much for meeting me, Diana said, getting her own coffee before sitting down across from her. Of course, Maya said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. I was surprised to get your email. Diana nodded, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. I can imagine. Look, I'm not going to pretend that audition went well. It didn't. But I want you to know something important. What happened up there wasn't about your talent. It was about your nerves and your training, or lack of it. Maya felt her cheeks burn. Richard made that pretty clear. Richard can be harsh, Diana said carefully. He believes in tough love, though sometimes I think he forgets the love part. But here's what he didn't tell you and what you need to hear. You have a naturally beautiful tone. Your pitch when you weren't panicking was actually quite good, and there was real emotion in your voice even through all the fear. Maya didn't know what to say. She had spent 2 weeks telling herself she had no talent, that she had been delusional to even try. I'm not saying this to be nice, Diana continued. I'm saying it because I know what I heard. The problem is that you have raw talent but no technique. You're trying to build a house without any tools. Does that make sense? Maya nodded slowly. I've never had any formal training. I just sing at church and, well, I thought that was enough. It's a great start, Diana said. But if you really want to perform, you need more than that. You need to learn breath control, vocal placement, how to manage stage fright, all the technical stuff that turns raw talent into reliable skill. I don't know if I can do that, Maya admitted. After what happened, I'm not sure I even want to try again. Diana leaned forward, her expression serious. Can I tell you a story? Maya nodded. 15 years ago, I auditioned for a show that Richard was directing. Different theater, different city, but same Richard. I was 26 and fresh out of college with a music degree. I thought I knew everything. Diana smiled sadly at the memory. I got up on that stage and sang my heart out. And you know what Richard told me? He said my technique was adequate, but I had no soul, no emotional depth. I was just hitting notes without any real feeling. That must have hurt, Maya said. It destroyed me, Diana said simply. I went home and cried for days. I almost gave up music entirely. But then I got angry. Not at Richard, but at myself for letting one person's opinion define me, so I made a decision. I was going to prove him wrong. Maya found herself leaning in, caught up in the story. I spent the next 5 years studying everything I could about music and performance. I learned that Richard was partly right. I had been hiding behind technique instead of being vulnerable. So I worked on that. I took acting classes. I saw therapists to work through my fear of emotional exposure. And slowly I became not just technically good, but genuinely expressive. And Richard? Diana grinned. 3 years ago he called me and asked if I would be his musical director. He said I had become one of the best in the region and he wanted to work with me. I almost said no out of spite, but then I realized something. His criticism, as brutal as it was, had pushed me to become better than I ever would have been otherwise. Maya absorbed this information. So you're saying I should be grateful that Richard humiliated me? No, Diana said firmly. I'm saying that you have a choice. You can let that experience be the end of your story, or you can let it be the beginning of something better. And I'm offering to help you choose the second option. What do you mean? I want to train you, Diana said. Private voice lessons 3 times a week if you're willing. I'll teach you everything I know about technique, performance, and managing nerves. It won't be easy and it won't be quick. But if you're willing to put in the work, I believe you could be really good. Maya felt tears prick her eyes, but these were different from the tears she'd cried 2 weeks ago. Why would you do this for me? Because someone did it for me once, Diana said. And because I hear something special in your voice that deserves to be developed. So what do you say? Are you ready to start over? Maya thought about the past 2 weeks. The shame, the silence, the way she had stopped singing even in church. She thought about giving up on a dream she'd had since she was a little girl. Then she thought about Diana's story. About how failure had been transformed into growth. About second chances and kind strangers who saw potential where others only saw embarrassment. Yes, Maya said. And for the first time in 2 weeks, she felt a small flicker of hope. I'm ready. The first lesson happened 3 days later in Diana's home studio. Maya had expected something fancy, maybe a professional setup with soundproof walls and expensive equipment. Instead, she found herself in a cozy room that used to be a spare bedroom. There was an old upright piano against one wall, some music stands and shelves filled with sheet music and books about vocal technique. I know it's not much, Diana said, noticing Maya looking around. But this is where I've trained dozens of students over the years. Some of them are performing professionally now. Maya felt both encouraged and terrified by that information. Could she really become one of those success stories? Let's start with the basics, Diana said, sitting down at the piano. I want you to sing a simple scale for me. Don't worry about sounding perfect. I just need to hear where your voice is right now. Maya nodded and began to sing. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Her voice felt shaky and she was already overthinking every note. Stop, Diana said gently. You're holding all your tension right here. She touched her own throat. Feel your neck right now. Maya reached up and felt her neck muscles. They were tight as rocks. That's your problem, Diana explained. When you get nervous, you tense up and that tension goes straight to your vocal cords. They can't vibrate freely when you're choking them like that. Here, try this breathing exercise with me. For the next 20 minutes, they didn't sing at all. They just breathed. Diana taught Maya how to breathe from her diaphragm, how to let her stomach expand instead of raising her shoulders. It felt strange and unnatural at first. This is how babies breathe, Diana said. Watch a baby sleeping sometime. Their whole belly rises and falls. We're born knowing how to breathe correctly. But stress and life teach us bad habits. We're just going back to the basics. They practiced this breathing exercise for several minutes until Maya started to feel dizzy from all the oxygen. Good, Diana said. Now let's try that scale again, but this time I want you to put your hand on your stomach and make sure you're breathing low and deep. Maya tried again. This time her voice came out smoother. Not perfect, but definitely better. Hear the difference? Diana asked. That's the power of proper breath support. Everything else builds on this foundation. The first month of lessons was humbling. Maya realized just how much she didn't know. They worked on breathing for weeks before Diana would even let her try singing anything complex. Then came lessons on vowel shapes, on how to place sound in different parts of her mouth and head to create different tones. You're thinking too much, Diana would say at least once every session. Stop trying to control everything and just let the sound happen. But Maya couldn't help it. She was terrified of making another mistake, of embarrassing herself again. Every time she hit a wrong note, she would see Richard's face in her mind, hear his voice telling her she was wasting everyone's time. Diana noticed her anxiety. What are you so afraid of? She asked one evening after Maya had completely frozen up during a run-through of a simple song. I don't want to fail again, Maya admitted. What if I practice all this time and I'm still not good enough? Good enough for what? Diana challenged. For Richard? For some imaginary standard of perfection? Or good enough for yourself? Maya didn't have an answer. Here's what I learned the hard way, Diana said, pulling up a chair and sitting across from Maya. You will never be perfect. No one is. Even the best singers in the world have bad days, crack notes, forget lyrics. That's part of being human. The question isn't whether you'll be perfect. The question is whether you'll let the fear of imperfection stop you from trying. Those words stuck with Maya. She started writing them on sticky notes and putting them around her apartment. On her bathroom mirror, on her car dashboard, on her computer at work. Let the sound happen. Good enough for yourself. Don't let fear stop you. Slowly, things started to change. Not just her voice, but her whole mindset. She began practicing in her car during lunch breaks, not caring if other people in the parking lot saw her. She sang in the shower again, this time applying the techniques Diana had taught her. She even started singing at church again, and people noticed the difference. Your voice sounds different, her choir director said one Sunday. Stronger somehow. Have you been taking lessons? Maya smiled. I have, actually. 3 months into training, Diana introduced something new. We need to work on your performance anxiety, she said. All the technical skill in the world won't help if you freeze up on stage. How do we fix that? Maya asked. Practice, Diana said simply. You need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. So starting next week, you're going to perform for me at the start of every lesson. Just me, but you're going to treat it like a real audition. Pick a song, prepare it, and perform it. And I'm going to sit there like an audience member and watch. The first time Maya did this, her hands shook so badly she dropped her sheet music. But Diana made her pick it up and start over. The second week was slightly better. By the fourth week, Maya could get through an entire song without her voice cracking from nerves. Good, Diana said. Now we're going to raise the stakes. Next month, I'm hosting a small recital for my students. Just family and friends, maybe 20 people in the audience. You're going to perform. Maya's stomach dropped. I don't know if I'm ready for that. You're not, Diana said bluntly. But you never will be if you don't try. And this is a safe space to practice. These people are coming to support student performers. They're not coming to judge you. The month leading up to the recital was intense. Maya practiced her song until she could sing it in her sleep. Diana helped her choose a piece that showed off her natural strengths while avoiding the technical difficulties she was still working on. You're not trying to prove you're the best singer in the world, Diana reminded her. You're just showing how far you've come. That's enough. The night of the recital arrived. Maya stood backstage and the familiar panic started to creep in. Her hands were sweating. Her heart was racing. For a moment she was back at that audition, hearing Richard's harsh words, feeling the shame wash over her. But then she remembered everything Diana had taught her. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, letting her stomach expand, feeling the air fill her lungs completely. She rolled her shoulders back and shook out her hands. You've got this, Diana whispered beside her. Remember, this isn't about perfection. It's about sharing your voice. When Maya's name was called, she walked out onto the small stage. The audience was just as Diana had promised, mostly family members and friends of the performers. They smiled at her encouragingly. Maya took her position, nodded to the piano accompanist, and began to sing. The first note came out clear and strong. She felt her breath supporting her sound, felt the placement of the vowels just as Diana had taught her, and something magical happened. She stopped thinking about technique. She stopped worrying about making mistakes. She just sang, letting the emotion of the song flow through her. When she finished, the audience applauded warmly. It wasn't a standing ovation. It wasn't overwhelming praise. But it was genuine appreciation, and that meant everything. Diana was waiting for her when she came off stage, a huge smile on her face. How did that feel? Maya thought about it for a moment. It felt like I was actually performing instead of just surviving. That's exactly what it should feel like, Diana said. And this is just the beginning. You've been training for 6 months now. Your voice has gotten so much stronger, and more importantly, your confidence has grown. I think you're almost ready. Ready for what? Maya asked, though part of her already knew the answer. There's another show being cast at the theater next month, Diana said, and I think you should audition for it. Maya felt her stomach flip. The theater? The same place where she had failed so spectacularly. where Richard would be sitting in that same seat watching her, judging her? I don't know, Maya said. What if the same thing happens again? It won't, Diana said confidently, because you're not the same person who walked onto that stage 6 months ago. You've worked hard. You've learned. You've grown, and you deserve a second chance to show them what you can really do. Maya knew Diana was right. She had come so far, but the fear was still there, lurking in the background. Think about it, Diana said. You don't have to decide right now, but I believe in you, Maya, and I think it's time you started believing in yourself too. That night, Maya lay in bed thinking about everything that had happened over the past 6 months. The humiliation, the unexpected mentorship, the countless hours of practice. She thought about how she had almost given up on singing completely, and then she thought about how it felt to stand on that stage at the recital, to sing with confidence, to share her voice without fear. Maybe Diana was right. Maybe it was time to face her fear and try again. Maya stood in the parking lot of the theater, staring at the same building where her dreams had been crushed 6 months ago. Her car was running, heat blasting, but she couldn't bring herself to turn off the engine and go inside. She had spent a week making this decision. Diana had been patient, never pushing, just reminding Maya that the choice was hers. Finally, Maya had filled out the audition form online and received a time slot. Today. Right now. You can do this, she whispered to herself. You're not the same person you were before. She thought about all the early morning practice sessions, the hours spent perfecting her breathing, the countless times Diana had made her perform in that small studio. All of that had to count for something. Maya turned off the car and grabbed her bag. Her sheet music was inside, pristine copies that she had marked up with all her notes. Breathe here, open the vowel, support from the diaphragm. Each marking was a reminder of what she had learned. Walking through those theater doors felt like stepping back in time. The lobby looked exactly the same. The same worn carpet, the same posters on the walls, the same smell of old wood and stage makeup. Maya's hands started to sweat. She checked in at the front table where a young woman with a clipboard gave her a number. You can wait in the hall. We'll call you when it's your turn. Maya found a seat on a bench outside the theater doors. Other performers sat nearby, some humming to themselves, others looking nervous. She recognized a few faces from the local theater scene. These were people who did this regularly, who were comfortable in audition settings. She tried not to compare herself to them. The door opened and someone came out. Looking either relieved or disappointed, Maya couldn't tell which. The young woman with the clipboard called out number 23. A man stood up and went inside. Maya looked at her number. 27. 4 more people before her turn. She closed her eyes and started her breathing exercises. In through the nose, let the stomach expand. Out through the mouth slowly. Diana's voice echoed in her head. Your breath is your anchor. When everything else feels out of control, you can always control your breath. 3 more people. 2 more, 1 more. Then her number was called. Maya stood up on legs that felt like jelly. She walked through those theater doors into the dim auditorium, and it all came flooding back. The stage lights. The rows of empty seats. And there, in the 5th row, sat Richard. He was looking down at some papers, making notes. He didn't look up when she entered. Next to him sat Diana, who gave Maya a small, encouraging smile. On Richard's other side were 2 other people she didn't recognize, probably the producer and assistant director. Maya walked down the aisle toward the stage, her footsteps echoing in the quiet space. She climbed the steps and suddenly she was standing in the exact spot where she had fallen apart 6 months ago. Name? Richard asked, still not looking up. Maya Chen, she said, and was relieved that her voice came out steady. Richard's head snapped up. His eyes narrowed as recognition dawned. You came back, he said, and there was something in his tone she couldn't quite read. Surprise? Curiosity? I did, Maya said simply. And what will you be singing for us today? He asked. Think of Me, from Phantom of the Opera, she replied. She saw Richard exchange a glance with Diana. It was a challenging song, one that required both technical skill and emotional depth. Maya knew what he was thinking. This was the same girl who had cracked on a much simpler song. What made her think she could handle this? Whenever you're ready, Richard said, leaning back in his seat. His posture said he expected to be disappointed. Maya handed her sheet music to the accompanist and took her position center stage. This was it. This was her moment to prove that the past 6 months had meant something. She nodded to the pianist, and the opening notes began to play. For a split second, Maya felt the panic rising, but then she heard Diana's voice in her mind. This isn't about perfection. It's about sharing your voice. Maya took a breath, a real, deep, supported breath, and began to sing. The first phrase came out clear and controlled. She felt the placement. In her head voice felt the breath supporting every note. But more than that, she felt the emotion of the song. A young performer hoping to be remembered, hoping to matter. As she moved into the higher sections, the parts that had terrified her before, Maya felt something shift. She wasn't just hitting notes anymore. She was telling a story. She was that character, vulnerable and hopeful and desperate to be seen. The theater was absolutely silent except for her voice and the piano. Richard had sat forward in his seat. Diana's eyes were bright with pride. The other judges had stopped writing and were just listening. Maya reached the climactic high note, the one she had practiced hundreds of times. Her breath supported her as she held it, full and resonant, letting it ring through the theater before bringing the song to its gentle conclusion. The piano played the final notes, and then there was silence. Maya stood there, breathing hard but controlled, waiting. This was the moment where Richard would tell her to stop, would criticize her, would send her away. But he didn't speak. Just sat there staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. Finally, Diana started to applaud. The other judges joined in. And then, slowly, Richard brought his hands together in a few deliberate claps. "Sing it again," Richard said suddenly. Maya's heart skipped. "I'm sorry." The final verse, he clarified. From Think of Me waking. I want to hear if you can maintain that level of control and emotion through the entire climax, not just one high note. This was a test. Maya knew it. He wanted to see if that performance was a fluke, or if she could actually deliver consistently. "Of course," Maya said, grateful that her voice didn't shake. The pianist played the introduction to the final verse, and Maya sang it again. This time, knowing what was coming, she poured even more into it. Every technique Diana had taught her, every emotional breakthrough she'd had in practice, all of it went into these final phrases. When she finished the second time, the silence lasted even longer. Richard stood up from his seat and walked toward the stage. Maya's pulse quickened. This was it. He was coming to tell her face to face that she still wasn't good enough, that she had wasted his time again. He stopped at the foot of the stage and looked up at her. His expression was serious, unreadable. "6 months ago," he said, his voice carrying through the theater, "I told you that you were embarrassing yourself." Maya felt her face flush at the memory, but she held his gaze. "I told you that you had no business being on stage," and he continued, "that you needed training before you wasted people's time with auditions." "I remember," Maya said quietly. Richard paused, and then something unexpected happened. His stern expression softened just slightly. "I was harsh that day, perhaps too harsh, but I was not wrong that you needed training." He gestured toward Diana. "What you've done in 6 months is remarkable. Diana tells me you've worked with her 3 times a week, practiced every day, pushed through your fear and your self-doubt. That level of dedication is rare." Maya didn't know what to say. Was this praise? From Richard? "Your performance today," he continued, "showed real technical skill. Your breath support was solid, your pitch was accurate, and your emotional connection to the material was genuine. You've proven something I rarely see." He paused again, and Maya held her breath. "You've proven that humiliation can either destroy a person or forge them into something stronger. You chose to be forged." Diana was smiling now, her eyes glistening with tears of pride. Richard turned to the other judges, then back to Maya. "Diana has done exceptional work with you, and you've clearly put in the effort to grow. The role of Christine is yours if you want it. Rehearsals start next Monday." For a moment, Maya couldn't process what she'd just heard. The role was hers, the lead role, in the same theater where she had failed so spectacularly. "I want it," she said, and her voice came out strong and sure. "Thank you." Richard nodded once, then returned to his seat. As Maya left the stage, her legs were shaking, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from the overwhelming rush of vindication, of achievement, of knowing that she had faced her worst nightmare and come out the other side. Diana met her at the stage door, pulling her into a tight hug. "I knew you could do it," she whispered. "I always knew." Maya hugged her back, tears streaming down her face. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have," Diana said, pulling back to look at her. "I just helped you find what was already there." As Maya walked out of the theater that day, everything looked different. The same building, the same parking lot, but she wasn't the same person who had run away crying 6 months ago. She had taken her worst moment and transformed it into her greatest triumph. And that, she realized, was what true strength really meant. Maya sat in her car for a long time after leaving the theater that day. She needed a moment to let everything sink in. She had done it. She had actually done it. She pulled out her phone and called her mom. "Hey, remember that audition I told you about?" "Of course, honey. How did it go?" Maya smiled, tears still fresh on her cheeks. "I got the lead role." Her mom's scream of joy was so loud Maya had to pull the phone away from her ear. "I'm so proud of you. I knew you could do it." But her mom didn't know the whole story. She didn't know about the disaster 6 months ago, about the humiliation, about how close Maya had come to giving up completely. Maya had kept all of that to herself, too ashamed to share it. Maybe one day she would tell her. But for now, she just wanted to celebrate this moment. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Rehearsals started immediately, and Maya found herself spending almost every evening at the theater. The cast was a mix of experienced performers and newcomers like herself. Some of them had been in multiple productions. Others were doing their first major show. What surprised Maya most was how supportive everyone was. She had expected competition, maybe even resentment that someone relatively unknown had gotten the lead role. But instead, her castmates were encouraging and helpful. "You're doing great," said Kevin, the actor playing the Phantom. He was in his 30s and had been performing in local theater for over a decade. "I can tell you've had good training. Your technique is solid." "Thank you," Maya said. "I'm still pretty nervous about all of this." Kevin laughed. "We all are. Anyone who says they don't get nervous is lying. The trick is learning to use those nerves instead of letting them paralyze you." It was advice Maya took to heart. Every rehearsal, she would feel the familiar flutter of anxiety. But instead of fighting it, she learned to channel it into her performance. Diana had taught her that nerves and excitement felt the same in the body. It was all about how you chose to interpret the sensation. Richard attended most rehearsals, sitting in his usual spot and taking notes. At first, Maya tensed up whenever he was there. But as the weeks went on, she realized something. His criticism, when it came, was constructive. He wasn't trying to tear her down anymore. He was trying to make her better. "That line needs more urgency," he would call out. "You're about to lose everything. Let us feel that desperation." And Maya would try again, digging deeper into the emotion of the scene. One evening, about 3 weeks into rehearsal, Richard called for a break. Maya was getting water when he approached her. She still felt a slight nervousness around him, a remnant of their first encounter. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" he asked. "Of course," Maya said. They walked to a quiet corner of the theater. Richard looked uncomfortable, like he was struggling to find the right words. "I owe you an apology," he finally said. "For how I spoke to you at your first audition, it was unnecessarily cruel." Maya was stunned. She had never expected this. Thank you for saying that." "I've been directing for over 20 years, Richard continued. "I've developed a reputation for being tough, and I've told myself that it's necessary. That artists need thick skin. That harsh criticism makes people stronger." He paused. "But watching you these past few weeks, seeing the performer you've become, I've realized something. You didn't become good because of what I said to you. You became good despite it. Diana helped me see it differently, Maya said carefully. She told me I could let that experience destroy me or transform me. I chose transformation. Diana is wiser than I am, Richard admitted. She always has been. I judge talent. She nurtures it. The theater needs both, but I'm beginning to think her approach is more important than mine. It was the most vulnerable Maya had ever seen him. This man who had seemed so intimidating, so untouchable, was admitting he had been wrong. I forgive you, Maya said simply. What happened that day hurt, but it also set me on a path that changed my life. I'm not glad it happened, but I'm glad where it led me. Richard nodded, something like relief crossing his face. You're going to be excellent in this role. I mean that. As he walked away, Maya felt something release in her chest. A weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying. The anger, the shame, the need to prove herself to him specifically. All of it lifted. She wasn't doing this for Richard anymore. She wasn't even doing it to prove she could. She was doing it because she loved it. Because singing made her feel alive in a way nothing else did. The weeks flew by. Rehearsals intensified as opening night approached. Maya worked with Diana twice a week to keep her voice in shape and to work through any challenging sections of the score. She practiced her blocking at home, running through scenes in her tiny apartment until her roommate knew all the lines by heart. If you forget something on stage, I've got you covered, her roommate joked. Finally, opening night arrived. Maya got to the theater 3 hours early, too nervous and excited to stay home. The dressing room was buzzing with energy as cast members did their hair and makeup, vocalized and tried to calm their nerves. Diana stopped by to check on Maya. How are you feeling? Terrified, Maya admitted, and excited, and grateful, all at once. That's exactly how you should feel, Diana said, squeezing her hand. Remember everything we've worked on, but also remember to just be present. Don't think about the audience. Don't worry about being perfect. Just tell the story. As Maya stood in the wings waiting for her first entrance, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she had run from this theater convinced she would never perform again. Now she was about to step onto this stage as the lead in a major production. She thought about every practice session, every breathing exercise, every moment of doubt she had pushed through. She thought about Diana's kindness and belief in her. She thought about Richard's apology and his acknowledgement that she had earned this. But most of all, she thought about herself. About the courage it took to try again after failing. About the determination to put in the work even when it was hard. About the decision to believe in her own potential even when others didn't. Her cue came, and Maya stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright. The audience was packed, and for just a moment she felt that old fear trying to creep in. But then she opened her mouth and began to sing, and the fear evaporated. Her voice filled the theater, strong and clear and full of emotion. She moved through the scene, connecting with her scene partners, losing herself in the character, and it felt like flying. The show went beautifully. There were small mistakes here and there, moments that only the cast would notice, but overall it was a triumph. When Maya took her bow at the curtain call, the audience rose to their feet, applauding enthusiastically. Standing there on that stage, soaking in the applause, Maya felt tears streaming down her face. These weren't tears of shame like 6 months ago. These were tears of joy, of accomplishment, of knowing that she had faced her greatest fear and conquered it. After the show, the lobby was filled with friends and family congratulating the cast. Maya's mom was there, crying and hugging her. Her co-workers from the insurance company had come, looking impressed and slightly shocked. Even some of her church choir friends had shown up to support her. Diana found her in the crowd and pulled her aside. I am so incredibly proud of you, she said. You've come so far. I couldn't have done any of this without you, Maya said. You gave me a second chance when I didn't believe I deserved one. I just showed you what was already inside you, Diana said. The talent, the determination, the courage to try again. That was all you, Maya. That was always you. As Maya drove home that night, still wearing her stage makeup, still buzzing with adrenaline, she thought about what she would tell her younger self from 6 months ago, that girl who had run from the theater in tears, who had wanted to give up on her dreams. She would tell her that failure isn't the end of the story, that humiliation can be a beginning if you choose to let it be, that the people who believe in you matter more than the people who doubt you, and that sometimes the worst day of your life is just preparing you for the best day of your life. Maya had learned that true strength wasn't about never falling down. It was about getting back up, dusting yourself off, and trying again. It was about transforming pain into power, shame into determination, defeat into victory. She had stopped embarrassing herself not by becoming perfect, but by becoming brave enough to be imperfect and try anyway. And that made all the difference.